Today on the Locked On Blues podcast, the St. Louis Blues start their round 2 series matchup against the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night. The odds are stacked against them. The Colorado Avalanche are an absolute wagon. However, I think this series might go a little longer than people think. I think the Avalanche might have a bit of a tougher time than a lot of people are giving the Blues credit for. So make sure you stay tuned. I'm going to give them all my thoughts on the end of the Wild series and then previewing the upcoming series between the St. Louis Blues and Colorado Avalanche. Make sure you stay tuned.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your number one source for daily Blues content. I'm your host, as always, Josh Hyman, and Tommy's a little busy today, so I'm taking this one on a solo episode, but we should be back in action together tomorrow. Look for a crossover with Chris Misielli of Locked On Avs. We're going to be talking to him soon as well. There's lots of fun stuff to get into. Unfortunately, that all surrounds a playoff matchup between the St. Louis Blues and Colorado Avalanche, a team that swept the Blues last year. So going to be getting into all of that and more today. But first, I wanted to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so it's been a little bit since we've talked. Crazy busy over here. I'm graduating college this week. I took a final this morning. It's been hectic, but fortunately, amidst that hysteria, I've had the pleasure of watching the St. Louis Blues win a playoff series for the first time in a minute. They obviously were swept by Colorado last year and lost to Vancouver in 6 a year before that. So haven't seen a whole lot of playoff success from the St. Louis Blues. That is until this year when they took care of the Minnesota Wild in 6 games, winning Game 6 in incredibly convincing fashion with a 5-1 victory. They scored 5 goals in the last 3 games of that series against the Minnesota Wild. 5-2 in Game 4, 5-2 again in Game 5, and 5-1 in Game 6. So that's going to sort of lead into what I'm talking about in terms of like the biggest X factors for the Blues in the series against the Avalanche, and that's going to be depth scoring. Before I get too much into the nitty-gritties of that series, because we have plenty of time to talk about that, I do want to talk about the end of the Minnesota series, Game 6, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it on the podcast quite yet. But that being said, it was a great performance all around. It started out with Nick Leddy, 1 game late, the game after I picked him as my locked on player of the game. Thanks a lot, Nick. Getting himself his first playoff goal in a Blues uniform. Just sort of walked in over the blue line, fired a puck on net, beat the goalie, 1-0. Ryan O'Reilly puts the Blues up 2-0 on the power play. Tyler Bozak puts him up 3-0. And then Tarasenko puts him up 4-0. And by the end of the second period, it's looking pretty clear that the St. Louis Blues will be moving on to round 2. And they did so, like I said, in convincing fashion. They got depth scoring. They got offense from their defense, which is something that I think the Blues had been lacking a little bit this year. And in the playoffs especially, that's something that they really thrived on in their cup run year, was getting offense from their defense. And they hadn't gotten that quite as much, this season. But this game was a good example of that, with Nick Leddy scoring that first goal, Perunovic getting himself his 3rd assist. I believe that's assist in 3 straight games for Perunovic on the Tarasenko goal, and then Parayko getting the empty netter. But I mean, there are a lot of storylines there. Tarasenko continues to be on fire. He has 5 goals on the playoffs so far, ties him for the team lead with David Perron. Scott Perunovic has looked spectacular on that power play. And just even on 5-on-5, he's looked pretty decent as well. But that power play, he's like a guaranteed, assist man out there. It's been crazy. Just watching him work on the power play. It looks like they're just running practice drills with how smooth and how calm he is out there. So that's something I'm really excited about. And then Jordan Binnington is an incredible story here. Was 0-9 in his last 9 playoff games, and then comes in and pretty much, closes the series out for the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, their offense scored a ton, but that first game for Jordan Binnington wasn't a walk in the park. He definitely was challenged. Had to work pretty hard to keep the Blues in the game before they kind of broke out with all that scoring. So Binnington did a great job in that series, and the one thing that Colorado has really improved on is their goaltending. Darcy Kemper is elite. It's not just a product of the defense anymore like it was last year. The Blues still got swept, but I think that's what inevitably led to Colorado getting out of the playoffs was their goaltending. This year they don't have that problem anymore. So I really think it could come down to Binnington versus Kemper, who does a better job of stealing a game. Whichever one of those goalies steals more games might win the series. Look, it's the Colorado Avalanche. What more can you say? I've talked a lot about, what gave the Blues success in round 1, and that's great. But the fact of the matter is they're going to have to play close to perfect hockey to beat the Colorado Avalanche. The thing is, I don't think that that's impossible. Obviously, if the Blues were to theoretically win a Stanley Cup this year, I'm fully confident that this round would be the most challenging for them. Maybe I'll bite my tongue. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe they'll sweep the Avs and then get swept in round 3, and I'll look like an idiot for saying that. But I think that this Colorado Avalanche team is far and away the best team in the NHL. They spent a lot of the year not fully healthy. They've gotten fully healthy lately. They're a wagon. It's gonna be tough to beat them. But in this second and third segment coming up, I'm gonna be giving my thoughts on the series and what it could take for the Blues to pull off a miraculous upset and advance to the Western Conference Final for the first time since they won the Stanley Cup. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But if you're like me and you think the Blues might have a shot of pushing this series a little bit longer than people think, maybe even winning the series, I'm sure the odds are pretty great. The Avs are a wagon. No one really thinks the Blues are going to make a whole lot of noise. So, maybe go put your money where your mouth is. Check out BetOnline because our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information from live betting to playoff, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts, and I'll be right back with the second half of today's episode. All right, so Colorado Avalanche. What more can you say? Cale Makar has 10 points in the playoffs already. Nathan MacKinnon is Nathan MacKinnon. Mikko Rantanen is Mikko Rantanen. Even the Shushkin on that line has been great. They got a lot of scoring depth. They have probably the best defenseman in the league right now, and another really good defenseman on his pairing in Devin Taves. They're probably the favorites to win the Stanley Cup this year, but they've got themselves a challenge in round 2 in the St. Louis Blues. St. Louis Blues are playing the best hockey that they've played since winning the Stanley Cup, and they're built for the playoffs. In a series that is going to rely on scoring because the Avalanche are going to score a ton of goals. That's just inevitable. You can only do so much. It doesn't matter if you've got Team Canada quality defense out there, 6 all-stars out there on defense. Colorado is going to get theirs. They're going to score goals. That's what they do. But the Blues have incredible scoring depth. The Blues have objectively more depth than Colorado. Obviously, Colorado's top-end talent is unmatched. The Blues aren't going to touch that. I don't know if any team in the NHL can touch that top-end talent that the Colorado Avalanche have in Rantanen and MacKinnon, Cale Makar, those guys. It's incredible what they do on the offensive end of the ice. However, past those top-end guys, the depth of the Blues is an advantage. The Blues can get more scoring out of more players than the Avalanche. However, again, the top-end talent of the Blues doesn't quite match the top-end talent of the Avalanche. We saw what Kirill Kaprizov did, scoring 7 goals in the series. It's going to be real fun to see what Nathan MacKinnon does. But, that being said, if the Blues can figure out a way to neutralize those top scorers or neutralize them in the best way possible, all of a sudden, this offense is looking a little bit more even. You're seeing more mismatches in favor of the Blues. Obviously, every time that Nathan MacKinnon line is out, it's going to be a mismatch in favor of the Avalanche. But after that, the Blues have 3 scoring lines of guys filled with 20 goal scorers. They got 20 goal scorers up and down their entire lineup. So beyond the Nathan MacKinnon matchups, the Blues have that depth advantage, and they're going to be more mismatches in the Blues' favor. It's just about taking advantage of those times when Nathan MacKinnon isn't on the ice and Cale Makar isn't on the ice. It's going to be rare. That's why I said before the break, you're going to kind of have to play perfect hockey because those guys can erase a deficit like that. You can take advantage of mismatches all you want, but the second Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar step back out onto the ice, they're a threat to score at any time. So, I mean, it's going to be a big test for sure for the Blues offense, but the Blues offense has been their best asset this season. And I think that, they have potential to cause some trouble for the Colorado Avalanche. The Nashville Predators had no offense in round one. Obviously, they're a playoff team, no disrespect to the Predators, but the Avalanche are going to be facing a much tougher and a much deeper offense than they faced in round one. And they still didn't do the best job of goal prevention in round one. Obviously, they had their way with Nashville, absolutely. But still, Nashville got some goals here and there. And the Avalanche aren't perfect. Let's see, they gave up 3 goals in the last 2 games. Obviously, they scored 7 and 5 in those games. They won one game 2-1, and they won another game 7-2. So the Avs scored a ton of goals, but they didn't pitch a shutout. They didn't pitch a defensive masterclass at any point. I mean, yeah, that 2-1 game was pretty impressive. I believe, did that one go to overtime? Yeah, it did. It did go to overtime. So, look, if the Blues can do what Nashville did in that game 2 and, frustrate the Avs and Jordan Binnington, or maybe even Billy Husso, who the heck knows, steals a game, the Blues can get a win in this series. Blues do that again, they can get 2 wins in this series. All of a sudden, the Blues do what the Preds couldn't and score more than 3 goals in a game. Who knows? The Preds were not a strong offense. And I mean, yes, Colorado has a spectacular defense. They've got, a defensive lineup that goes 6 deep. There's really no weak links on paper in their defense, but I think you can really attribute more of the lack of goal scoring to Nashville's offense rather than Colorado's defense. And I think that their defense is going to be tested a lot more in this series than they were in round one. So, I mean, it's tough. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, yeah, the Blues are going to have an easy time in this series. They're going to wipe the floor with the Colorado Avalanche. The fact of the matter is the Blues are absolutely underdogs in this series. There is a very likely chance that Colorado continues to steamroll this round. And like I said, it's going to take perfect hockey from the St. Louis Blues. They're going to need to play perfect on defense. Jordan Binnington is going to need to play like Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in every single game to give the Blues a chance. That's not impossible, though. And also that's not a guarantee that that's what it's going to take. They could very well get by with winning a couple games like 5-4, 6-5, some crazy high scoring games. I wouldn't be surprised to see some really high scoring games in this series. There's going to be some defensive grudge matches in there for sure. But the thing about the first round series against the Minnesota Wild, and similar, honestly, to what the Colorado Avalanche did, is there weren't any close games. Colorado had one close game where they won 2-1 in overtime. St. Louis didn't have any close games in their series. And unfortunately, that does include the games that they lost. But the games that they won confidently. And they won, like, you knew it. There was never any doubt, in the final seconds. There was never a goalie pull where you were like, I mean, I guess the Minnesota did pull their goalie at one point. But there was really, there wasn't any time where I was sitting there like, hiding behind my couch like, oh, man, come on, just close this out. It was convincing fashions, wins for both teams. So it's interesting because we haven't really seen what this Blues team plays like in close games in the playoffs a whole lot, especially down the stretch. And I think there are going to be some close games in this series, and it's going to kind of come down to that third period of whoever wins the third period wins the game. And I think we're going to see that a lot. And that's when, anything can happen. In this upcoming third segment, I want to get into more of the goaltending matchup, as well as just giving my series predictions and like my locked on players of the series, quote unquote. So should be a fun one. Make sure you stay tuned for that. But before I get into that, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar. Now listen, you've heard about Built Puffs, protein infused marshmallows. I got a new one for you. Birthday cake puffs. Imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting. I know I'm guilty of it. Opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 60 grams of protein. Crazy, right? That's what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I honestly have never had anything like it before. They're available right now, and we can't promise that they'll be there tomorrow. So go get them today at Built.com. If you haven't tried the puffs, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Just friend to friend. A chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. Yeah, you heard me. Delicious, flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. Make every day your birthday with Built's birthday cake puffs. Built has taken the delicious experience of biting into a fresh slice of birthday cake and robed it into 100% white chocolate. Oh, I love white chocolate. And added sprinkles. So go to Built.com right now. Get the birthday cake puffs. And while you're there, save yourself some money. Use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And we'll be right back with the end of today's episode. All right. One final segment. Going to try to wrap up this series, give my thoughts. It's going to be a tough one. I said it before, and I will maintain this, that I think if the Blues win a Stanley Cup this year, this series will be the hardest. Obviously, Stanley Cup final, objectively harder just because, you're tired, injured, whatever. But in terms of quality of opponent, the Colorado Avalanche are the best team in the NHL, and they are fully healthy and firing on all cylinders. They got a lot of rest after round one, which might not be a good thing or might be a good thing, depending on who you ask. On one hand, it helps them recover from injuries, get a lot of rest. Game plan against the Blues a lot. On the other hand, you kind of lose a little bit of that playoff intensity. You got to ramp back up a little bit more. The Blues have played playoff hockey more recently than the Avalanche. That could be a factor, especially early on with the Blues kind of getting off to a hot start and the Avs needing to ramp up to their playoff speed. Who knows? One thing I think is going to be really crucial in the series and maybe might be the deciding factor is goaltending, because these are two extremely potent offenses, maybe the two most potent offenses in the NHL, or two of the most potent offenses in the NHL. The Avs do it a little bit differently. They rely more on their top end scoring, but oh boy, do they have plenty of top end scoring. Blues obviously rely on their depth scoring. Either way, these two teams score a ton of goals. Both of them scored 5+ goals multiple times in their round one series. And whose job is it to prevent goals from going in? The goaltender. Colorado Avalanche have Darcy Kemper in that. He's been elite for them. No secret there. But the Blues have probably Jordan Binnington, maybe, most likely. And tell you what, Jordan Binnington, at least in his last few games, has been elite as well. We haven't seen, an elite Jordan Binnington since Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Until now, I don't think he's quite on that level yet. Isn't exactly stealing games, pitching shutouts, but he has been really good for the Blues, and he's only going to continue to get better, in my opinion, as the series goes on, as the playoffs go on, as he gains more confidence, playing in front of fans, all that fun stuff. Going into Colorado, he loves playing in enemy barns. He loves hearing boos. He loves hearing people chant his name. So who knows? He could have a really, really strong series. The thing is, Darcy Kemper obviously is going to have a strong series. Most likely, he has a little bit more support on defense. So unfortunately, Kemper might have a little bit easier of a time than Jordan Binnington in terms of just quality of shots faced against. But that being said, you weather the storm of McKinnon and Makar and those guys. It's a little bit easier after that. Obviously, it's still difficult. They've got a lot of talent on that roster, a lot of depth scoring, just not quite as much as the Blues, like I said. But if Binnington can lock those guys down and gain confidence and frustrate them like he frustrated everyone in the Minnesota Wild, not named Kirill Kaprizov, he could be the MVP of the series for the St. Louis Blues, and I think he will be the MVP for the series for the St. Louis Blues if the Blues win. If the Blues win this series, it will be because Jordan Binnington, or maybe Ville Husso, because who knows, but most likely Jordan Binnington stole some games. I think whichever goalie steals more games is the team that's going to win the series, because both of these offenses are capable of scoring 5+ goals in a playoff setting. The Minnesota Wild defense is no slouch. Marc-Andre Fleury obviously struggled with his rebound control, but still otherworldly talent. Stanley Cup champion Marc-Andre Fleury. What more can you say? He's a great goalie. So they've shown that they can score 5 goals on a quality defense and a quality goaltender. The Avs have done the same. So it's really going to come down to, in a game that the Avs should have scored 5 goals or could have scored 5 goals, maybe they only scored 1 or 2 because Jordan Binnington was an absolute menace between the pipes. Or, maybe a game where they should have scored 2 goals and, played rock solid on defense. Jordan Binnington pitches a shutout and the Blues win like 1-0, 2-0, something like that. I really do think it's possible. I know it sounds like I'm trying to convince myself, but it really feels like this. Just a lot of people are just talking about this series as if it's already over, already writing the Colorado Avalanche into the Western Conference Finals. And you know what? They're the best team in the NHL. There's good reason why people are betting on them to win this series. But a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Avs in 4, Avs in 5." This is not the same St. Louis Blues team that got swept by the Avs. On the other hand, this isn't the same Avs team that swept the Blues. They have stronger goaltending, a little bit stronger defense, whatever, what have you. But this is not that same Blues team. That Blues team was without David Perron, was without Justin Falk for a majority of the series. Jordan Binnington was not playing well. They weren't getting depth offense at all. This team is different. This team is a whole lot better than that team that got swept by the Avs last year. And anything can happen in the playoffs. Anything can happen. The St. Louis Blues have been underdogs in playoff series before, and they've won those series. This is getting reminiscent of those years against the Chicago Blackhawks, where the Blackhawks were an absolute wagon. The Blues couldn't do anything until they beat them. And obviously, it's only been 1 year of the Avs beating the Blues in the playoffs. But they've been the team to beat for a few years now. The Blues have, faced that daunting task for a few years now, and they've played them well enough in the regular season. Who knows? This could be a series where the St. Louis Blues say, "Hey, remember us? We won a Stanley Cup couple years back. We still have a lot of that roster and the same coach. We're capable of doing it again." And I think they might shock a lot of people. I'm excited. It's going to be an electric series. There's going to be so many goals scored. I'm sure we're going to have some crazy recaps as well. Tommy and I, plus Chris, host of Locked On Avs. You'll be hearing from all of us at some point throughout the series. Like I said, I'm graduating this week, so it's going to be a little spotty. I'm going to be doing some solos. Tommy's going to be doing some solos. We're going to try to get episodes out every single day. But like I said, it's going to be a crazy week. But after that, we'll get back on track. So let's hope we got some plenty of games to talk about. Real quick before I wrap this one up, hope you all like the new brim. I talked about wanting to join the St. Louis Cardinals fandom because the Red Sox are breaking my heart. I talked about wanting to get a St. Louis Cardinals hat. And then a week later, this shows up at my door, courtesy of one of our most loyal listeners, J-Tap. So I know you say you didn't want to shout out, but I really appreciate it. This hat is so cool. I'm going to be wearing it in like literally every podcast. Go Cards. So that Albert Pujols pitched last night. That's awesome. But yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that. Also hope you guys like it. It's pretty cool looking. I love the black on black. Anyways, that's all I got for you today. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We've been growing pretty quickly on there, getting a lot of views, a lot of comments, a lot of likes. So much fun doing that. I love being able to, interact with you guys and just, have a physical, video going on. It's more fun, more rewarding than just recording the audio. Obviously, both are great. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that fun stuff as well. But definitely check out our YouTube, Locked On Blues. A lot of fun there. You get to see my beautiful face. You get to see the hat that I was talking about, courtesy of J-Tap. Good stuff there. Follow us on all of our socials on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Locked On Blues. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. You can follow my co-host Tommy on Twitter at TWelcher15. That being said, thank you all so much for listening. And as always, let's go Blues.